and I know you're referee and everything, and bring you as referee, but I want you to sort of look after some of the guys and da 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 and do this, do that. I said, yeah. And he says, listen, he said, I want to bring some monster looking guys, into. And I said, well, okay. Well, I said, well, who are you thinking of? He said, I just want big guys. He says, I think he had Dominator had come up.
He was, he was there.
Dominator was there. So, and I'm like thinking, I'd got a UWA tape, and I was thinking of Drew. So go up for this meeting in London at this hotel, and basically I thought, because the trains at the time weren't as clean as they are now, there were all these old bloody, dirty trains, and I thought, well, I'm not travelling up in my suit in that. I'll go up there, check into the hotel, and I get changed for this interview. So I go up there and they check me into the hotel and everything, and I go change and I put my suit on and everything. I go freshen up, and then I give him this tape, and I said, "Oh, look, I know you've been asking for big guys. Do you want to have a look at this tape?" And he puts the tape in, and it's Drew. Do you know what I mean? And then he suddenly just went off on one and was like, "Oh no, oh no, that was it." I said, "If you want to speak to Drew, I'll put him on the phone to you now if you want." He's like, "Oh, okay, yeah." And then right in front of me, he gets on the phone, and he's like, "Nah, sorry, mate." He said, "We can't use big fat fellas like you." Oh, Drew just went on to one. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I'm outside the room and I can hear Drew, in his, polite self, every other word's F and C, and I'm going to come down, I'm going to rip out your throat and shit down your neck and, all the nice things, because Drew had cancelled off a load of jobs to come down to London.
Uh-huh.
He was on his way down to London, and this guy just went, nah, I can't have you, mate. You're big and fat. Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, and then he just handed the phone back to me, and I'm like, what do I say? Is don't worry, matey. I knew it wasn't you. And I'm like, I felt really bad. Do you know what I mean? But again, and then he goes on the internet and he starts burying me on the internet, saying, "Oh, Steve Lynskey turns up in a real, cheap Asda suit and this, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute,
what was it, Tesco?
No, oh mate, come on, you've known me since day one, I've never been. If anything, I'm always smart, presentable, and everything else, and I'm like thinking, what is this guy on? Do you know what I mean? He just started burying me, and then all the in jokes came because we were doing stuff for Greg. Up in Morecambe, and he's like, "Oh, we'll take a picture of this suit and then we'll put it online, Steve Lynskey and, cheap Asda suit slur, do you know what I mean,
Oh my Lord, you've had your fair share of grief, haven't you? But I think you've risen above it though, mate, in the end, and come on good at the end. So right, let's move on. That was Wrestle Express, bizarre for me as well. I remember on the night time he was saying he was just completely and utterly wasted on bottles of wine. I mean beyond drunk, passing out and everything. And I went up to get my expenses and a wage for going down there for the day. And he said, "How much do you want?" And I said, "Well, it's probably 60 quid for the train, blah, 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 blah." And he threw 600 quid on the table.
Yeah.
And I was like, I really can't take that. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah.
But he was just so wasted.
He did the same to me when he. So I just checked into this really plush room, and then he checked me out of it again. Do you know what I mean? And he was like, "Well, listen," he said, "No, I'm sorry, because I was going to go to Worthing to meet Doug, because Doug Williams," and I said, "I'll tell you all about it." But yeah, I says, "Listen," I said, "Well, I'm gonna have to get a cab back now, like this," and yeah, he chucked a load of £50 notes on the table. Do you know what I mean? And then so he took this money on the table to get me a cab back, and I ended up getting on a tube train for £4. Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
But as all this turned out, it wasn't his money, and I think he went to court for it and everything, didn't he?
Yeah.
Very, very dodgy. Now, I'm not good with time periods, but I think around this time, and I think this is one of your worst claim to fame, because I remember at the time it all happening, and you was, huge things, like you say, when the UK fan forum was popular and things. Yeah. What is the story of the show where the ring never turned up?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Really, you check your microphone.
Tell us. I mean, obviously, it's a long time ago, but people could still be implicated here. But what? There was a show. There was Americans on it, and you'd been booked to provide the ring.
Yes.
Right.
What had happened was Jake Roberts was in the country at the time, and I did a few shows for this guy that was running shows with Jake Roberts. Jake had this guy made him a ring, but never paid him for it. So basically, John phoned me up and said, "Oh, I really need a 20-foot ring. I really need a 20-foot. It's got to be a 20-foot ring. I got my big, GWF show up in Blackburn or wherever it was, press up there somewhere anyway." And I was like, "Can't really help you." I said, "The only ring there is." So I'll tell you what. No, I do know whether there is a ring, but I don't know whether the guy would be willing to hire it out. And then so I rung the guy up who'd kept the ring off Jake because Jake hadn't paid for this ring. And I said, "Look, the guy wants to hire it." I says, "Look, if you've lost money on it and Jake hasn't paid you, whatever, why don't you hire it out and make some money back off the ring?" Do you know what I mean? Because, ring hire is quite, you get quite a bit of money for it, whatever. And he's like, "Well, find out how much he wants to pay." So anyway, I ring John back and I said, "Right, well," I said, "there is a ring." I said, "But you've got Jake Roberts on the show." And I said, the guy that he's just ripped off, not paying for the ring, he has the ring, but he's the only one that's got like a 20-foot ring. Bar maybe Mark Sloan, FWA. So he goes, well, I'll do it for, and the ring was in Brighton at the time. And he goes, well, bring it up. And he says, I'll give you 150 quid all in. 150 quid all in, when your petrol would probably cost about 100 quid. Do you know what I mean? And I said, "No, mate, it's not going to happen." And then I rung somebody else up and somebody else said, "No," he said, "Do it." I went, "What?" "Tell him you'll do it." And I'm like, "Why?" I said, "No, I can't do that." And he's like, "Okay, all right, fair enough." And then I said to John, I said, "No, it needs to be more money than that." Do you know what I mean? And then I said, "The condition is you don't discuss it with anybody." Do you know what I mean? You do not discuss where the ring's coming from or whatever. He'd come up with a more sensible offer. I said, "You can't discuss, to Jake where the ring's coming from." "Yeah, okay, no problems. Puts the phone down. 5 minutes later, Jake Roberts is ringing up going, "I know you got my ring, fucker, and I know you're coming up here, and I'm going to be waiting for you, and I'm going to have, like, gypsies with me, and this, that, and the other." And I thought, "Oh, for feck's sake." So then I rung up this other guy, and this other guy says, "Right, don't sweat it." He said, "Just don't bother going up there." Do you know what I mean? If Jake's going to be up there and kicking up, he said, "Just don't bother." And obviously, basically, I didn't leave the house because I knew Jake was going to be there. John had already double-crossed me there.
But just a moment, this is on the day of the show, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, that's a neglected mention there. We're not talking 3 weeks out. This is on the day of the actual show.
Day of the show. But obviously, Jake had already rung me up and told me that he knew that I was coming up there with a ring, so he's going to have people there waiting for it to get the ring back, etc., etc. Which, again, gets neglected to be told in the big sob story of, this big screw job, etc., etc. So, yeah, I thought, right now, I'm not going up there. Do you know what I mean? And do you know what? I think the biggest thing wrong that I did was I didn't let the boys know.
Yeah.
That was probably the biggest thing I did. I should have sort of like, clued a couple of the boys up that, that John had tried to, screw me over by, telling Jake that that it was me providing the ring and this, that, and the other. And Jake had already phoned me up and said, "I know you're coming up there, so I'm going to get the ring back, blah, 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 blah." And I thought, I'm not having any of that crap. And then I'd spoken to somebody else and they said, "Well, just don't let him think that you're coming up there." Do you know what I mean? Just leave it. Do you know what I mean? So the day of the show, I'm getting a phone call. "You setting off?" "Yeah, mate. Yeah, on my way. Yeah. Walking out the front of my house, so there's traffic going by. Yeah, on my way. Yeah. See you later. Gets later in the day. You know what I mean? "Oh, where are you?" "Oh, mate, I've broken down." "Well, where have you broken down?" "Well, I'm about 20 miles outside of Preston." I'm going to ring up the AA. I'll get the AA to come and tow me. Yeah. Well, we've got everyone standing by. Don't we? All the fans are outside and da-da-da-da-da. And of course, this is all going on the UKFF. The whole rundown's going down. You know, Steve Lynskey says he's 20 miles outside of Preston and da-da-da-da-da. And the AA come in and, like, pretty much at the end I said, mate, the AA have turned up and they've pretty much said, look, we can take you to Preston, but then it's going to cost you so much to get you home, or we can just turn around and take you back now. And I just said, sorry, mate, I'm having to turn around and go back. Again, another thing that he failed to mention in all of this, while he was blasting me, and it was all going on the UKFF that time, because I said to him, I said, ring somebody else to see if you get a ring. Do you know what I mean? And he did. It might have been Jake the Fakes lads.
Right.
Someone
yeah.
who was like, oh, well, it's probably those FWA lot. No, we're not doing it. But he'd rung somebody else up, asked them for a ring. They said yes, and they didn't turn up either. But he totally just went on this massive rampage that it was like, oh, Alex Shane and me had screwed him over and stiffed him over and this, that, and the other. And yeah, that's pretty much the gist of that. You know what I mean? But
I think it's good that even though it's probably, a good 10, 12 years later, it's still a story that's spoken about. And, you know, we've got, I think, 90% of the truth there. So that's pretty good, I think. That's quite impressive.
He also neglected to tell about the hundreds of people who still weren't paid back for their ticket money for that show. And I'll tell you someone who was there, and he pulled me on it a month or so ago, and he goes, do you know what? He goes, I came all the way down from Scotland, and my dad put on a coach to come down to see that show, and that was Grado.
Yeah, I think, like you say, I was literally reading it live on the UK fan forum at the time as this story was unfolding. So I'm pleased to have that out. So there it is, your great ring story. Amazing, absolutely amazing. I believe 90% of what you told me, so that's very impressive. Now, also around this time, we were both working. Now, you'd obviously transitioned into being, you've done everything, haven't you? Refereeing, you've ring announced, etc. Yeah. I was still wrestling away, so we did FWA, didn't we, at this point in time? What did you think? Because it was a real big deal at one point in time. What are your FWA memories?
The longest queues ever for getting paid at Brockspawn.
Yeah. Hey, I always got mine first.
I honestly thought, and I said this to Alex, I said, Alex, you always had me do the main event because then I was always the last one in the queue, and it was always like, oh, can I send you a check? Or I'll pay you next time. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you know, it wasn't just me. You know what I mean? It was something that I think a lot of people had just come to, you know, it wasn't all the time, don't get me wrong, but, you know, there was sometimes it'd be a Brockspawn. It was always a Brockspawn.
It was, yeah, it was. I mean, I'd say I used to just go in and get mine, and then I obviously had trust with Alex and trust with people because I'd often help out, you know, paying a few of the lads, and he'd give me the money to pay people and things like that, which was always nice to have the trust of people. But I think FWA at one point in time was a real hot ticket, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, you know, like Brockspawn was always sold out, and then the shows just got bigger and bigger, and then Alex then sort of somewhat took over, and then we ended up at the Coventry Sky Dome doing, you know, the Uprising shows and things like that, which again you were a part of. I'm trying to think of some of them, British Uprising 3 with D'Lo Brown, and because again that spills out into stories because you had D'Lo Brown.
I was just about to say that spilled out into a few I wouldn't have thought of mentioning, but yeah, we had a lot of fun with D'Lo Brown as well, didn't we?
Yeah, you had a few heart attacks over that, I can remember.
Oh my God, yeah, we'll tell that story in a minute. That's a classic. Not for me, it's not. It's very rare. How long I'd been doing this job for, it's very rare I'd get done on a rib, but you did get me good. Well, go on, tell us it now. Go on.
So, poor old Stevie Knight's got this show, and unfortunately, I think did you not have a no show with Jake Roberts?
The show previous, Jake Roberts didn't turn up. It didn't make any difference. One person asked for a refund, and the show was fantastic without him on it. But for the next show, D'Lo Brown became available. So we got him on the show, and we went to pick him up from Doncaster or somewhere. We went out for a couple of days, me, you, and D'Lo.
Yeah.
stayed at my house. We did a load of publicity.
Yeah.
We went for a night out. We had a great time. And then you went off to Portsmouth with him.
Yeah, he went down to Portsmouth. He was staying at my house. And then I think it was like 2 days before, or 2 days before you rung up, and I think I'd planted the seeds in your head then, and I said,